kind of to lay a foundation and get everyone on the same page. So it kind of covers a lot of different organ systems, and it's mostly physiology heavy, basically just to get people, like people who may not have had a lot of certain classes in undergrad, get them kind of up to speed. So that's what the first semester is for. And then we also start our doctoring course, which is a lot of it is patient encounters and knowing how to do a history and physical, knowing how to interact with patients, but also learning about the healthcare system, about healthcare policy, insurance, and other things, just like navigating the system and actually being a doctor. So that's kind of like more the sociocultural aspect, and then foundations is like the hard science. Doctoring continues as 3 different courses. So there's a doctoring 1 in your first semester, then doctoring 2, and then doctoring 3, and then that's the end of doctoring. So I'm in my 3rd doctoring class right now, but it's all just kind of a continuation that keeps happening. Foundations is a semester-long course that has like 1 averaged grade between a few exams, and then afterward we go into organ-based or organ system-based modules. So for example, like cardiovascular, pulmonary. Right now we're in our neurology module, we're finishing it up. So each one of those will last anywhere from like 4 to 6 or 7 weeks. And then we take a module exam along with like a doctoring exam, but the modules themselves are like separate courses. And those are our main courses. In addition to all of that, you can also take electives, but those count toward your blue book, which is something you'll hear a lot when you go into med school. And it's basically something that's like standardized, that goes on your residency application when you're applying. And it's essentially just like different electives and stuff that you participated in. There's no actual grades, it just says that you participated in stuff. And that'll go toward that. But the only things, at least at McGovern, that we get grades for are those classes. And then also in our first semester, there's an anatomy lab that factors into the foundations grade. Typically in person, they're doing it kind of as a hybrid thing this year. I'm sure Jackie and Lillian can talk to that.
Sina did a great setup. Yeah, Southwestern is slightly different, but based off of what Sina said, the blocks that happen in your 2nd semester and onwards is about the same. Our first semester, instead of having foundations as like 1 big course, we have all of the classes you would kind of cover under foundations as separate classes. So we would start with biochemistry, then we had like cells and tissues and genetics. And so those, it's super fast and super short. I think the longest course was probably 3 weeks. They vary from 1 to 3 weeks long. And we just like blast through a lot of those the very first semester. And then we're starting to transition into our more organ block systems. So those are, like Sina said, longer. I think he said it was like 4 to 6 or more. Yeah. So that's what I will be expecting soon. In addition to the short courses that are happening, anatomy is happening in the background up till Thanksgiving. So we're about to finish anatomy soon. Yeah, and I guess another thing is we run on a 1.5 year pre-clerkship. So by our spring of 2nd year, we will start our rotations. And so for prep, we also have like a doctoring as class in the background. I don't think any of that is graded for us though. So it's not really a class, but we get paired with a mentor and we get grouped into small groups of 5 to 6 students with a doctor, and the doctor takes us in to see standardized patients, and we learn the physical exam, the history, and all of that. And so that's like a once a week thing that's happening since day 1.
Dang, you guys sound like really different from mine. Okay, so basically, we kind of do classes in like 8-week, 7-week blocks, and basically you just kind of take like 1 class at a time. So I just finished like anatomy last week, but then throughout this whole first year, we also have this class called POM, which is practice of medicine, and that's basically where you do like those things like talking to patients, you learn how to take like a history, a physical, and then you like talking to people like in person. Right now it's like on Zoom and stuff, so it's a little different. But yeah, so I'm taking molecule, cells, and tissues, so it's kind of like a biology biochem class. And then I think later on we're doing like more pathology and stuff like that before we get to organs for 2nd year.
Thanks, guys. Does anyone have any follow-up questions to that question specifically? I feel like it might just be better to shoot that question now. Okay. So our second question, and Lillian, we will start off with you. Have you found it easy to balance med school with normal adult life, specifically doing things like cooking, cleaning, and having fun?
So Southwestern's known to like be the most overwhelming the very first semester. And I've heard prior to coming here, upperclassmen have said like, oh, meal prepping and like getting food from my parents if you're in the area, like they really relied on that. So I agree. It's started to slow down now. So if I wanted to cook for myself, if I want to hang out, um, and have fun, then it's like fine from here on out, I'd say. But the first 3 months of school is really, really hard. And at that point, everyone's just like studying. And a lot of people have said that they haven't been able to, or upperclassmen, because COVID is different for us, but upperclassmen have said even during their first 3 months of school, a lot of people didn't meet their long lasting friends because everybody was so busy studying and was really stressed. So for us, it's like no at the very beginning, and then yes, starting from I'd say October onwards.
Dang. I think UCMB like really emphasizes like how they like balance work and life. So it's not been too bad, but yeah, definitely I think like the hardest part is just not being able to like go out and see people. Like I stay at home a lot. So I kind of like my only breaks are to cook or to like work out or to do something like related to like living. But yeah, other than that, like they try really hard. They're like, oh yeah, take lots of breaks. But I think like they really do like a really good job at like breaking up the knowledge and like their class schedule and stuff. So I don't feel too overwhelmed, but I know I did take like anatomy and stuff before. So having that background really helped with a past like class.
Yeah, so I guess speaking to pre-COVID med school, there was a lot of, we had a lot of socials in our class. After each exam, we would have like block parties because they were called block exams, so block parties, you know. And then we, you know, lots of other class socials. We had all our little friend groups. Like I know that in my friend group, we would do, back when The Bachelor was airing, that like crazy terrible season of The Bachelor, we would have like bachelor nights and we would go watch it. And so there were things like that that we would do pretty, I think pretty frequently. And I always made, and still do, like make a point to incorporate that into my studying because otherwise you just kind of go crazy. It definitely was super, you know, isolating at the beginning of COVID, especially over the summer when we were supposed to be doing like, people were supposed to be doing research and preceptorships and things of that nature. And it all kind of fell through because of COVID. And so a lot of us were just kind of cooped up at home. So that was definitely a little miserable, but I think we've started to hit our stride a little bit more coming back in the fall and kind of figuring out how to deal with it while still socializing in a way that's like safe and a little limited. So yeah, I think, and I've actually, if I'm being honest, I've been meal prepping and exercising more frequently in med school than I was in undergrad. And more frequently in COVID than I was before COVID, because you kind of define your own schedule and you like kind of, you just like work in whatever you need to do. So it's a little easier when your schedule isn't quite as defined. I think in first year you have, especially first semester, you have a lot more required sessions and stuff, but afterward, and with anatomy, oh my God, anatomy is such a time suck. But after that, it really like your schedule frees up a lot and you have a little more time to pencil in, I guess, the things that you want to do. But I meal prep very regularly and exercise regularly. So there's definitely time to do that. I think in third year, things get a little crazy, especially with like night rotations and like when you're on surgery and other things that like take up so much of your time and you only get like one day off a week. But in preclinical, it's definitely possible and feasible.
Awesome. And thanks so much for answering some of the questions in the chat. But I think one question that came up that I think, Sina, you touched upon in the chat was kind of relevant to this. How do you feel about the difficulty of your class material? If any of you guys want to expand on that.
I like the mnemonic, just to expand on what I said in the chat. I like, well, there's a very, not mnemonic, but there's a very popular phrase, the whole like drinking from a fire hose thing. I'm sure we've all heard it. Yeah, Jackie knows what's up. Yeah, so that's basically what they compare it to. I feel like any individual thing that we learn isn't necessarily like super difficult, but all of it paired together is just too much sometimes. So you really have to figure out how to like parse out the material and learn it in a way that like you're gonna retain it because it's just so much. So that's why we use Anki, which is a flashcard app that does like spaced repetition and shows you like a certain number of cards, flashcards that you've like been doing for material in the past every day, and spaces it out so that you're seeing things from like, for example, from the cardiovascular system now, even though we did the cardiovascular system like back in February, March, and just to like keep things fresh in your brain. And then if you forget it, then you like start the card over again. So that's something that we use simply just to like keep the fact and like the easy memorizable things like in here, because all of it comes back on step 1 in April. And of course we have like, we have dedicated study time for that. But for some of like just the quick facts, it's good to have Anki to keep everything flowing. But I don't know what y'all think.
Go ahead, Jackie.
No, oh my God, no, Sina, I agree. So we had like a class called Meta, which is like basically like a 6-week like cake class where they told us like all these things like, oh, how to be empathetic, how to be a good doctor. They kept saying this entire school year is going to be like drinking from a fire hydrant. And I was like, are you serious? It was so stressful to hear that, but definitely agree. It's just like all the knowledge is like super interesting and like, you're going to use it because this is your career. But I think the whole thing is like, it's just coming at you really fast. So you just have to like set like a good schedule for yourself and like learn it throughout the day and like really commit to it and then stop studying and then just like slowly make your way through it. Cause like you can do it, but I think people just get overwhelmed and then they procrastinate and then it just gets like a lot. But yeah, not too difficult if you know how to like time manage and stuff. So doable.
Yeah, and in addition to just like the overload of information, it's also like the information is presented in 4 different ways. At least it is for me. And so you have to really pick and choose how you want to learn things. And so there's like an organization to it where you don't really have an undergrad. So for example, in any of my classes, there's like a textbook for it. There's the lectures for it. There are the flashcards for it. There's other people's notes that are like already condensed. So like out of the 4, what are you going to do? You're not going to do all 4. It's like too much material in too little time. So trying to sort through what you want to look at and like what you think is the best for each class is also, I would say, part of that information overload. That was something I definitely felt super overwhelmed about at the very beginning.
Thanks so much. So our next question, and we'll start with you, Jackie, is what did you do to research all of the med schools you were applying to, and what were the most important factors you considered when applying? And also, would you change anything about your application process if you had the chance?
Honestly, I don't know if I have a good answer for this. I'm like kind of bad because I didn't really research a lot of medical schools. I was just like, you know what? I live in Texas. I'm just gonna apply to all these Texas schools and see what happens, see who takes me. So basically that was what I did. I think like just checking out like their website, like there's so much knowledge out there. Like I'm sure you guys have like done like Reddit and you guys have done like forums and stuff to try to figure these things out. So I think just like trying to like narrow it down and see like what you personally like is probably gonna like help guide you in your decision. I think for application cycle and stuff, applying early, like I felt like I did not apply early enough and I definitely like procrastinated because it's like the summer and you're not doing much. But yeah, no, definitely get that in like as soon as possible. And like also secondaries, like don't wait a week, like do it as soon as possible. Like, that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
You want to go next, Lillian, because it was more recent for you.
That's fair. Okay. I think it really varies on your, I guess it's also like where your stats lie, right? Like what your resume is like, and also financial restrictions. I think that impacts a lot of where people choose to apply to. I was lucky enough to be able to apply to a lot of schools, both in and out of state, because I was also really indecisive about like where I wanted to go. And so after seeing the interviews that I got, like a huge part of really choosing the school at the end of the day is like your experience there when you actually go and visit. And so that's part of the interview process, right? And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can't really give much advice on choosing because at the end of the day, like you really don't know like what you qualify for. So so you just like spread like I would just say apply to as many as you can depending on like your situation and see where it takes you. Oh yes, the virtual interviews, that sounds awful. I'm sorry for anyone who's going through that, especially just sitting through at your computer like all dressed up for 8 hours a day. Like no. And then as for what was the second part to that question? You're muted.
The second part was if you could change anything about your application process. Would you
Oh,
change
okay.
it? Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with the sending it in early. I think something else with like doing your secondaries early is also you can usually find the prompts online from previous years and they don't change, so you could pre-write your secondaries to submit it faster. Something I didn't really acknowledge or recognize is that if you submit it earlier, you can probably get an interview offer earlier, and if you interview earlier, you're more likely to get an acceptance before match day. And I don't know what everyone knows about match day, but when is match day again? I don't remember when it was.
I think it's like February 3rd. That's what it was
Yeah.
last year.
Okay,
this
but
year.
then when was that deadline? Early February. Yeah, so okay, yeah, you had to like rank it by January, right? And so if you get interviews before January and you've completed them, they could send you acceptances like in November, in December, in beginning of January. And that way you know like, oh, I have some offers and that's like really reassuring to have. So that's something about just also just submitting in early. You can also like you wouldn't have to wait and be really anxious on February. Yeah, what Sina says in the chat.
Yeah, the whole, I mean, I don't have a lot to add. The whole process is very convoluted. And it's like, I like to joke when I was applying, I liked to joke that it was like, you know, I was waiting longer than it took to bring a baby to term or to carry a baby to term, because it's just like a full, like it can be a full year-long process, the application process. So yeah, my advice would also just be like, you know, apply as early as possible. It gives you the best shot of getting into the schools that you want to go to. If you're, I mean, we're all in Texas. If you're a Texas resident, that gives you a big leg up with Texas schools, which there's so many of them, because Texas is really weird and has its own application system, which isn't true for any other state in the country. What that also means is that you're not going to be considered as much for like out of state programs. People still get into them. There's a lot of people at UT who get into out of state programs, but you have a better chance at Texas programs. And you also will be in less debt going to a Texas school. Believe me, I want to get out of Texas just as much as the next guy. I really want to go out of state for residency. And I did apply to some out of state schools for med school, but oh my God, it's so expensive. I am just gonna like rack up as little debt as I can in Texas and deal with Houston and then like go go out of state like for residency. I do like Houston. I liked Austin more, but I do think I think like, you know, in general, keep in mind that you're going to have a leg up for Texas schools over non-Texas residents. So use that. And then like Lillian and Jackie were saying, like when you actually, hopefully, you know, if you're applying the cycle, hopefully you can do in-person interviews, because that really helps you figure out if you match with the vibe at the school. And, you know, a lot of the schools look very similar on paper, but it really depends on the people there and if you feel like you fit in with what they have going on. Yeah, that's my advice.
And one question that was in the chat that I guess has to do with the application process is just what were your interviews like and how did you prepare prepare for them?
I guess I'll start. So at UTMB, it's kind of like 2 separate interviews. It's kind of like basic. It's just like a professor or some kind of like researcher, I think, that works at UTMB. And basically it's like an hour that's honestly only like 30 minutes. And then you like go through that one, go through the next one. And then you have like the rest of the day doing like whatever activities UTMB has planned. So it was like a tour and it was like talking about classes and stuff. And then you were done by 5, but you started at 8. So it was like a whole day thing.
Yeah, I interviewed at quite a few different places, so it really varied. The gist is like, yes, you usually have a breakfast and they give you an orientation and they give you a presentation on the background. And also, every time you go to an interview, you get a packet with like all the school info, but also it gives you the hour by hour schedule that you're running on. So it'll usually tell you what your interview times are, and like who the interviewee is. So something I recommend doing is if you see an interviewee or your interviewer listed, look them up. Maybe they're like specialized in a field you might be interested in or like you did research in. So that's always helpful. What else? And then yeah, you get a school tour. There's lunch, usually meet med students there, or there's like a panel, or like they all often lead the tour. So when I actually interviewed at McGovern, Sina led my tour. So, it's really cool to see a friendly face on the interview track because it is pretty stressful. And then also prepping for them. Oh, yes, that's fair. Prepping for interviews, I would say like for the big why medicine, the ones you're always going to get, like obviously make it genuine, but kind of also have a nice, well practice script for it in a sense. And yeah, I think it's like practice for the really big ones, and then the more like practice to your family, practice to your friends. Personally, I was never good at interviews, so I definitely like really needed that practice. And then just repetition. Like if anything, you could also just record yourself answering a prompt. You can also find common prompts online, kind of everywhere. And yeah, just lots of practice. And so you go in not like completely unprepared. At the same time, your first interview, you're pretty unprepared. It's inevitable. But after that first one, it helps you a lot for the following ones.
Oh, I guess it's my turn. Yeah, I think, well, none of us can speak to the virtual interview day, right? Because none of us had that. So, and hopefully if you're applying this cycle, you don't have to experience that as well. Or this coming cycle, I guess I should say. But yeah, I think for the interview day, typically the interviews are conversational. That's how they are at McGovern. McGovern, when I was interviewing, was not doing MS4 interviewers yet, but now they are. So at a lot of schools, you'll get like maybe one MS4 interviewer and one faculty member. And then at some schools, you'll get like one faculty member who's a PhD, one who's like an MD or a DO. There are some different combinations you'll get. And like Lillian was saying, typically they'll look at your application and see what you're interested in and try to match you up with a faculty member who has similar interests in some regard. So you'll get in there, and it's really great to look them up beforehand, because whatever they do, it gives you an idea of what on your application they might ask about. So I did psychology research in undergrad for my thesis, and I was a neuroscience major. So I got paired up with a lot of psychiatrists and neurologists and people who did research in those fields. So whenever I had someone who specialized in something like that, I just mentally prepared myself to talk a lot about my research. I also think it's important to prepare, especially for the most frequently asked questions, I guess. But try not to over prepare, because then you'll just kind of like come off sounding rehearsed. It's kind of inevitable, because if you go to several different interviews and they ask the same question at every one, you're going to end up saying the same thing every time. But just try to make sure you don't sound like a robot. That's why it's good to know how to answer, tell me about yourself, why medicine, you know, have an idea of what you want to talk about for like your biggest challenge, your biggest failure, whatever, all of those like classic interview questions. But don't like, I would say don't like write down a script for yourself or like memorize a script if you can avoid it, because you don't want to sound scripted essentially. So, you know, practice a few times, but once you have an idea what you want to talk about, try to like take that and run with it in whatever interview you're in. And also be prepared for like some interviewers will ask like random questions about stuff on your application. Like I worked at an escape room in undergrad. And one of them was just like super interested and curious. And he's like, what even is that? So we just talked for for 10 minutes about what an escape room is and like what I did there. So pretty interesting. Like they really just want to know more about you. So, you know, it's a good opportunity to talk about stuff that's not explicitly on your application or things you can expand upon that wasn't on paper. So, and there are some interviews that are like stress interviews. I think they're less frequent these days. I didn't really get stress interviews, but I did have like one question about socialized healthcare at El Paso, which was a little stressful. Just anytime you're asked about policy, I think it's a little stressful as an applicant. And then I also, you know, Dell Medical School is cute and quirky and does their MMIs. So just that's like another thing that is a different interview format with like ethical questions. But that was kind of fun too. Just very different from the other MD schools. I think there are a couple of DO schools that do MMIs as well. So yeah.
Awesome. So I guess starting back around to you, Sina, and also having to do with the application process, how did you brainstorm ideas for the personal statement?
Yes. Okay. So the personal statement. So first of all, I would say don't even worry about writing. If you're applying this coming cycle, don't even worry about writing your personal statement until spring semester. I didn't really write it until, I want to say it was like going into spring break was when I was like really getting serious about like getting something down on the paper. I think for your personal statement, and I've advised some friends and different people about this, it really just has to come from a place of like look into what is motivating you to go to med school, because it's a super long path. It's kind of torturesome. And you know, you're definitely not doing it for like the money or whatever. Like it's definitely something that needs to be coming from deep down. So I just encourage people to like think about what really drove you to come into like healthcare in general. What was the motivating factor? If you can narrow it down to one event, that's great. People love to hear a narrative. And that's typically something that like when you're writing your personal statement, having some sort of narrative or storytelling in there is going to like capture people's attention. But I think just in general, being able to isolate kind of either one thing or some different factors that influence you to come into medicine, and then just writing on those is a good place to start. The most difficult thing is starting, like putting something down. I don't know if y'all have watched SpongeBob and like he's writing his essay for an entire hour and then it just says the on the paper. Even just writing the, like that's good enough, you know, start with something and then you can build off of it. So for me, my personal statement was about my struggle with my mother's mental health. So my mother struggles a lot with depression and anxiety. It got really debilitating for her when I was in high school. And that was the first thing that kind of like drove me to go into healthcare. And then speaking on that with like the lens of being from an immigrant family and seeing how my family kind of interacted with my mom and dealt with that. That kind of was something that motivated me, like, oh, you know, I not only am really interested in mental health, but there's also this like perspective that I bring that I think is really lacking in medicine right now. So that was something that I felt, you know, not only motivated me, but also is like, I don't know, something that medicine is really needing that I could kind of speak on. So yeah, so I think, you know, find whatever really like drove you. And for some people it is like super early in life, but try to create a narrative out of it. So like, you know, for me, I kind of started my personal statement with some like action words and like delving into like the plot of like something that was going on in my life, and then kind of like building off of that, because you want something that's going to like hook people from the beginning. But at any rate, that you'll get there. Like the most important thing is starting, getting something on the paper, and then going through like many rounds of revisions. Like find some close friends, find, you know, maybe some professors who will help you, or anyone who like you think would want to help you edit your personal statement, and just like send it to them a few different times, your parents, anyone, whoever. That'll really help you like narrow it down and figure out. And also people who are like in medical school and who have been through it are also great resources. Yeah, that's what I would say, is just like start with something and then take it through several rounds. But I'll let Jackie and Lillian talk.
So mine's very different from what Sina said. I always like never had that one moment. And so anytime I heard that, it was like, I don't know how to apply this. And so how I ended up building my personal statement was based on a lot of aspects of medicine that I really liked. So say research, the teaching aspect, the like actual science aspect. So all of that, I managed to find like a little story or like a little narrative for each segment. Like, oh, I had this really impactful experience with this one person when I was volunteering, or I tutored at UT. So I used that in my personal statement. It was like, I really impacted somebody else, and that's something I want to carry over to medicine. So I found all these bits and pieces, and I included like, I guess, 3 little stories in my personal statement throughout. And really elaborated on that and why it would point me into the direction of medicine and why I wanted to go into medicine. So that's like a different approach that I did. But yeah, I agree with what Sina says, like don't start too early. And yeah, I definitely didn't start until probably around the same time Sina started, when it's like spring break before applying. And yeah, I think that's all I got.
Okay. I guess for me, like a little bit of it was like I was exposed to like weed when I was little, so that got me into like, oh, drugs, and I was like that stuff and like all this kind of like medical things. So I think that's kind of like what I spoke upon. But honestly, it's like whatever you guys like, what motivated you guys? Like, how did you guys choose this? Like, even though it's like small, you might think it's like small. Like to you, it's like a life-changing decision thing. So I think just like build like your own narrative, like Sina and Lillian are saying, and basically just try to like have the reader understand like why you chose this, like what path, like, what decisions did you make that took you down this road. And they want to make sure that it's like you have strong convictions about it, like you just didn't like think about it off the top of your head, you know what, I'm going to be a doctor. They want to make sure that you've like actually like truly thought about this and like really like try to do these things and try to get like involved, and like AMSA is like a good way to do that. But yeah, definitely just try to like cultivate your own like kind of narrative, your own kind of like story. I honestly read like a bunch of my friends' application stuff, and reading it as a story is definitely more interesting. But don't be afraid to do like a bunch of revisions. I think if you're not doing at least 40 revisions, you're doing it wrong, dude. Like you're gonna keep rewriting it and it's gonna suck, but you're gonna keep doing it and it's gonna get better every time. And don't think it's gonna be perfect like the first time. You're like, oh, I just put out a perfect like 500-word essay. No, dude, it's gonna take a while. So yeah, don't start too early, but definitely like put in a lot of time, a lot of thought into it. And like it's your own like personal reasons why you went into medical school, but as long as you cultivate that and like really write about it in a very like well developed way, I think it's gonna end up fine.
Thank you. Oh, okay. So our next question, jumping back to Lillian. This is kind of like a collective of several questions that were asked from multiple people. What is your favorite part about medical school? And also, what is something you wish you had known before starting medical school?
Ooh. Okay, so yeah, I think Aditi also mentioned like favorite thing about Southwestern. It's hard to say. I feel like there's a lot more that I just haven't seen yet. So like the community aspect of the school, there's a lot of big events that Southwestern usually hosts, except I haven't experienced any of it. So during orientation week, there's actually like a camp retreat that the whole class goes on, and they usually like group up and play like an Olympics type of game competition. And then there's also one right before winter break. I believe usually in the first semester there's like also a fall formal type thing that happens. Not too sure, but like, so there's a lot of fun things that happen, except I can't speak about it. So right now, what I really have to go off of about Southwestern, I'd say, is the how they like to they really value the patient aspect of it. And so when we're swamped in lectures and we're just studying all day every day, they really prioritize helping us remember like what we're all working towards. So in a couple of our classes already, they would have usually a patient would come into one of the lectures and talk about how this disease, which we happen to be learning about, has affected their day-to-day lives. And those have been really impactful. Right now, they've done it through Zoom, so the patient logs on too. So those I've really appreciated from the school. Also just like the daily, the how we're learning actual physical exams. And we just had one of our biggest checkoffs where we did a physical exam for the whole body. And so that's pretty cool that we're doing that in our first semester. Something I wish I would have known. I don't know. Because I was advised, they paired us up with a second year student before we started. And I was told like, don't think about medical school, enjoy your last moments of freedom. And so all throughout, like I'd say April through August, like I was pretty brain dead, and then I was just chilling in bed and like binging movies and really just relaxing. So I'm glad I did that. And then med school definitely did hit me like a truck. It was a lot, but I don't know. I don't know if I could say, because a lot of it is just unknown. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'd say for that one.
Okay, I guess I'm next. I think that the main thing about like medical school, like a lot of it's like I didn't realize like how independent I was gonna be. Like I don't know if it's the same for like Lillian and Sina, but like in Galveston, obviously it's kind of like small, and there's only like 200 of us in like a class, but like there are like people living here that have like their own jobs. Like I don't live in like a college kind of like centered area anymore. So definitely like it's just kind of like weird because you're like, where are all my classmates? Like, where's my support system? You're kind of just like tossed into like the ocean and you're just like swim. So definitely that was a little disconcerting. I talked about it a little in the chat, but I really like Galveston's vibe. It's kind of like relaxing, like maybe too relaxing, but it's fine. So I do like a lot of like outdoor stuff. I try to get like out of the house a lot. So yeah, seen it. Yeah, too much. But I think yeah, so that's what kind of drew me to like UTMB. What I wish I knew about medical school. Honestly, it is a lot of studying, but a lot of the studying is like very productive studying. You know, like how in like college and stuff, you like study for an hour, but you're really just on your phone. Like in medical school, it's just like straight, like your brain's like all in. So that was very different. And I think honestly, like taking anatomy in college was definitely super helpful. It just gave you like a really good background, a really good like solid foundation base for like anatomy in medical school. Because it's like the same thing, but it's just like faster. It's just more info. So
I think I missed the prompt. What's the prompt again?
It is, what's your favorite part about med school? And also what's something you wish you had known before starting med school?
Okay, thank you. By the way, to piggyback off of what Jackie said, I think it's probably super helpful to take anatomy before coming in, but you do not have to. Aditi, I'm talking to you. You don't have to take anatomy before coming into med school. You'll be okay. I was perfectly fine in gross anatomy, like all my classmates were too. It's hard, but you get through it, you know, and then you're done with it. So if you really don't want to take anatomy, like you don't have to take anatomy. It's okay. But it is really good. It is really good. Like it's good preparation, but you know, you don't have to take it. It's okay. Okay, so that was just my little aside. But okay, favorite thing about med school, I think I do like how much free time I have in med school to kind of define my own schedule. Definitely had free time in undergrad too, but like most of the lectures you can just kind of stream on your own time. So you don't have as many required sessions or things to go to as undergrad. You can figure out what you want to do with your schedule and how busy you want to make yourself. I think that one thing that I've really enjoyed being able to do here is I mean, McGovern has 240 students in a class, which I think is the largest medical school in Texas. And even that is like so much smaller than when I was, at UT, and there's 50,000+ students at UT. You really feel like, not even a drop in this like giant ocean. But at McGovern, like I've been getting myself super involved in advocacy at the school to implement a lot of things that I want to see like changed. And I think in any medical school, that's something that can be done. And that's like, I know a lot of the administrators now, like people know me by name. I am the president of our LGBTQ+ health org. And that's something that like is super lacking in curriculum and just like community spaces being built. So being at such a small school and just the fact that medicine is so traditional in general, like I've been really pushing that at our school for like diversity measures to be taken in that for that minority population and others. There's been a lot of push for like curriculum reform and several other things that we've been working on. So you can get as involved with extracurriculars as you want to. I definitely overextended myself, as I'm known to do, and every type A person who goes to med school tends to do. But it's enjoyable. Like I really like it. I feel like I've made a really decent impact, like a measurable impact in like the year that I've been here. So yeah, I think like one thing that I really enjoy about coming to med school and starting on your like professional career is that you actually have like a platform and a voice, whereas before maybe you didn't as much, at least within this profession, right? And now you can kind of start to enact some change. And I think students don't realize how much influence they have, but you really can make a lot of things happen, even just being a medical student, and hold people accountable and make administration make changes. So that's something that I really enjoyed. Also, I really like that I can shadow and do whatever without having to go through this elaborate process. I have the little like email that gets me into everywhere. Very nice. Yeah, everyone else can probably concur with that. And a lot of people will just say like, hey, just come in whenever, like I'm here at these hours. Totally fine to just go in and say them once or whatever, like it's not some elaborate thing. And that's really fun too, because I can do that kind of on the side, and that especially when I'm getting super bogged down with schoolwork, it kind of reminds me of why I'm doing this. So yeah, it's a nice way, it's a nice reality check. Oh, and then wait, what was the second part? I'm so sorry, Carissa. I can answer that very quickly.
No, that was awesome. It was just, what is something you wish you had known, if anything, before starting med school?
I think, okay, one quick thing that I will touch on is you're not going to know everything for your exams. I think that's something that I wasn't comfortable with coming in. People didn't really tell me. You're going to have, especially like the way that McGovern works with foundations, you have like 6 or 7 weeks of material and then an exam over everything. And it's like from different organ systems and just random stuff thrown in there. And it's a lot to keep in your mind. And I kind of realized from the beginning, like, oh, there's going to be certain things for these exams that I'm just like not going to prioritize the same way as other things, because maybe I struggle with them and they weren't covered as thoroughly. So I'm just going to kind of like leave it aside. And that's just for self-preservation. Like you have to prioritize certain things over others. Whereas like in undergrad, I feel like you had enough time and like resources to be able to study like everything that you were going to see on the exam and go into it. Maybe that's more true for certain classes than others, but that's something that I definitely had to become more comfortable with in med school. Is like, you're not going to know everything because there's just so much.
Thanks. And our last question that I think is a good one to wrap up on is, how did you learn to stop comparing yourself to other pre-meds, I guess, while you're in undergrad? I think, Jackie, we'll head to you first.
I'm sorry, what was the question? You kind of cut in and out.
Oh, sorry. The question is, how did you learn to stop comparing yourself to other pre-meds?
This is a good question. I think like kind of like on the way, like through your application process, you kind of realize that you kind of are on your own. Like a lot of people like get kind of like weird about like talking about like essays and talking about interviews and stuff like during the process. And you're just like, okay, like I just need to stop comparing. Like I just need to get in medical school and just like just do your own thing. I know it's kind of like hard because like I feel like college is like everyone's trying to be a pre-med. Everyone's trying to like almost like compete a little. So it's a little bit like toxic, but definitely just try to like focus on yourself. I honestly, I kind of stopped junior, senior year, because I was like, well, screw it, like I'll get in, you get in. I don't know what's happening, so it's kind of like that. But definitely try your best because it is kind of hard. I don't know. I don't know. You guys go first. I'm gonna see if I come back to this.
Yeah. See, I don't know if it ever really stops. I think like in undergrad, like Jackie was saying, a lot of it is just like there's a lot of toxic pre-med culture. I feel like there's a lot of that stuff that you kind of need to cut out, and people who are just trying to like gun past each other to get to med school, whatever. A lot of that culture exists. I think in med school, there's really like not a lot of like interpersonal competition, I guess. Like people are just trying to help and support each other. We're all kind of like struggling and we just want each other to get through, P equals MD, all of that. But I think in med school, like you kind of become your own worst enemy in a way, because that's when the imposter syndrome like really hits hard. You're like, what if this was a fluke? What if I'm here by mistake? What if I can't actually do this, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly like everyone else's successes become your failures, and you're like, oh no, what, like, why is it that, or just when anyone does well on anything, you're like, oh shoot, I should be doing that. Or like, they're like, oh, I studied this resource and it was good for me. And you're like, oh my God, why didn't I do that? That's something that just like continues. Like I've talked to attendings and people who are just like full doctors who are like, oh yeah, I still struggle with imposter syndrome every day. So that's something that like will continue to happen. I don't think it's going to ever like fully go away. You just kind of have to confront those thoughts when they occur and be like, it's okay, I'm doing fine. Like, I don't need to compare myself to others. I'm gonna get through this. Yeah, I think a big part of it is just like recognizing that this is imposter syndrome and this isn't real, and I'm doing fine and I'm doing more than enough and I'm worthy of being here. Yeah, that's the trick. Like, I don't think the thoughts ever go away that you're like comparing yourself with others. I think like I was getting better about it when I was finishing undergrad, because my senior year, I wasn't taking a lot of pre-med classes. I was just kind of doing my own thing. I was chilling. Like I was very much chilling my senior year of college. And then I came into med school and I was like, shit, I guess I'm like back in this realm of thought again. And it's honestly like, it kind of felt like I regressed a little bit. But one thing that a friend of mine has said a lot is that like progress isn't linear. It's okay. Like if you feel like you regress, like that's okay. And comparing yourself to others isn't ever going to fully go away, but it's just something that you get better at dealing with. And you can identify it when it happens. You're like, no, it's okay. Like I'm my own person and I'm doing what's best for me. And it's like, I'm gonna get through this. But I guess there's no easy answer. That's just kind of something that's helped me.
Yeah, Sina has a lot of quotable phrases right there for sure. Yeah, I don't know. For undergrad, I think I never really struggled that much with it because I was never really in that pre-med toxic culture. So I managed to distance myself from that. And so it really was just like, oh, and I think a part of it was because I was chilling at one point, like junior and senior year for me. I like crammed all my pre-med courses in my first 2 years. And then I just finished my chemistry degree and took like really random classes the last 2 years. So I got really lucky with that. But I do feel what Sina said with like starting med school, like you're surrounded by all these super smart classmates who are also like amazing and the community's great. But at the same time, you're just like, wow, the test average for that was so high and I did not, I was like way below that one. But yeah, like progress isn't linear. And yeah, sometimes it's like you just there was probably outside factors that affected like what you scored or all these things. So at the end of the day, you're like, okay, UT Southwestern is also on a pass fail system. So really a P does equal MD because no one really cares about that number grade. And so that's like really helpful, I'd say. And then but then again, it's like not as applicable with what you guys are experiencing in undergrad. I don't know. I never liked the mentality of like I never like to think in the ways like, oh, if someone's better than you, they're taking away like a spot. Like, yes, spots are limited, but at the end of the day, if you're like, if this is what you want to do, you'll figure out a way to get there. And there's enough room for everybody. It might not, like, timing is different for everyone, situation is different, where you're going to be is different. But I don't like to get all wrapped up in like, oh, I'm not as smart as this person, I'm not going to get there.
Thanks so much, guys. Looks like we've reached our time, but if anyone else wants to just pop in with any comments or anyone, please feel welcome to do so, or just say thank you to our lovely med students, because we really, really appreciate you guys coming and taking obviously time out of your very busy schedules to come talk to us. So it means the world. But yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves, anyone, if you would like.
So nice to see everyone's shining faces.
I've got a kind of a question that relates to that last point. Even though it's pass fail, I know I'm thinking about it too early and I'm the neurotic type, but does that change your like step one plans at all? Now, or like, sorry, does the change in step one affect your studying plans at all?
I think it's kind of difficult because this has never been like a thing before, and we're not really sure how to go into it. My class still has graded step one, but we don't even know how that's going to look because, you know, things are going to be changing for the classes below us. And so we're kind of still going into it similarly to how they've done it in the past, because that's the only advice that we have. And I mean, ours is still graded, so I guess that's that. But yeah, we're not even sure if it's going to be reported or not. Also, McGovern does pass fail for the first semester, but not after the first semester. So we still have some preclinical grades, but honestly, preclinical grades really aren't that important. Step one used to be super important. I think they're taking some of the importance away from step one. And I think a lot of what's going to go into residency decisions now is clinical grades, which have always been very important, and step two, and then possibly like extracurriculars and involvement and stuff. But those are probably going to be like the bigger things now. I think what's probably going to end up happening is like we're still, at least my class is still going to be going hard for step one, and then we'll probably also end up having to go really hard for step two, because by that point it'll probably hold some more weight. Which honestly I think like theoretically is a good thing, because step two is a more clinically based exam anyway. So that's something that like will be a better predictor of whether or not you're a good clinician. But it's just a weird transition period because there's historically been so much pressure and like importance placed on step one, and now they're like trying to tear that away. And so all of us caught in the crosshairs are just kind of struggling and not sure what's going on.
Yeah, and even with the, like, everyone's running under the assumption that step one is going to be pass fail for us, but it, to this day, like, it's not confirmed to my knowledge. And yeah, like, we're just all running under that assumption. So I agree with what Sina said, with like the emphasis will just be on step two, then that's like the main shift, and then clinical grades. I don't think it changes how a lot of people are studying for their pre-clerkship classes. And I don't think like it's, yeah, I think there is a de-emphasis on like, oh, step one prep is not like, you don't have to think about that as early. But even then, like, we're so overwhelmed with our current classes that I seriously doubt like many people out there studying about it or thinking about it right now.
Yeah, I guess like for at least my classes and stuff, at least I was talking to MS2 when I interviewed last year, and she told me that she wasn't even thinking about step one and she was gonna take it in like the next like spring or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think like UTMB doesn't really like stress it too much, but yeah, they're just like, don't worry about it. Like you have like a whole like year to like prep for it. Don't even think about it. That's what everyone tells me. So I was like, okay. But yeah, they gave us like a book and stuff so we could start studying. But I mean, yeah, everything's just gonna be like based on step two, clinical grades. So guess you just have to do well for that. Yes, first aid.
Any other last minute comments, questions? Okay, well, thank you all so much again for coming. It was really good to see you guys, Lily and Jackie, Sina. And yeah, have a great rest of your night, everybody.
So nice to see y'all.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Damn it, I wanted to talk to them.
I don't know what happened.
I talked to them for like a little bit when they all came into the other room.
Mm. Well then, yeah, I was kind of confused because then when they came into this room, they were like, oh yeah, we were able to get into the other one. And I was like, oh, well, okay.
It's okay. It worked out well anyways. Good job, wonderful event.
Thanks. Much better than if it would have been with you know who.
Yeah, you know who. We do not speak of them here. I have a Chick-fil-A cookie. It's delicious and nutritious. I am health. Right. I think everything on the sign-up sheet is good. Everybody was on there. I made sure to write down names of people that came in as well later.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I just kicked off. I'll highlight it a different color. Hey, Sai. What's up? Oh, I can stop recording too.